When it comes to Mega Man, I've always had a weird relationship with it. For the original run of Mega Man games, I was never truly a fan of the gameplay. I don't think they're bad at all, just really not for me. Pretty much the same for the X series too. But when the 2000s came around and a new relaunch of the franchise, or at least a massive offshoot, was heading this way, I really found myself enjoying what it had to offer. From a brand new game series called Battle Network that would have more Pokemon-esque elements to it, to a manga that brought a lot of fun to these characters, to an anime that really solidified a click between me and the Mega Man franchise unlike anything before. This new vision for Mega Man was a complete overhaul. While the original Mega Man would stick around throughout the years since this, there was just such a specific moment in time from the early 2000s up until about 2010 that this new version of Mega Man was everything. Capcom really wanted something more than just a video game. They wanted what Pokemon had, what other franchises like that specifically had, which was everything. Tackling every bit of entertainment, not just the gaming or animation side, but toys and merch being a major factor that plays into it all. Today, as someone who was swept into the Mega Man madness at the time, I wanted to relive my experiences with you all through this era, from the Mega Man NT Warrior anime, the manga, and even the Battle Network video games, with a bunch of extras in between.
Who are you?
I'm Mega Man. Nice to meet you.
It certainly was an era to behold. The start of the 2000s really sparked so much competition, or more so Burger Kinging a McDonald's in terms of seeing what Pokemon is doing and trying to follow it as much as possible, but just being a tad different. Not as far as let me copy your homework, I'll just change a few answers necessarily. It really relied on how much effort the company behind the property was willing to put in. Enter in Capcom, a company that has had some major ups and some major downs throughout its company's history. But now it was time to really shake things up in the new millennium. Sitting on a bunch of IPs, they looked at this one specifically and said, yeah, we can do something with this. Mega Man was a massive game franchise, very much known for its action platforming gameplay and endless amount of sequels, or soccer. But nothing would prepare Mega Man fans for what was next. It was time for Mega Man to get a mega makeover, and I personally think it's pretty sleek. There's just something so 21st century about it, and I was in. On every single front, pretty much. The game would change, there would be external add-ons to explore, and for my animation-loving self, an anime that fits right in next to the quote-unquote competitors it wanted to be around. Mega Man NT Warrior, or Rockman.exe in Japan, would be part of this major refresh, with Mega Man having had an anime adaptation beforehand in the 90s that tried tying itself to what the video games were back then, so the new one did so as well, our main protagonist being Lan, voiced by Brad Swale and Alex the Duck. Yes, his name is Lan, and the story is about digital avatars in the internet. And of course, Mega Man, or Megaman.exe, voiced by Andrew Francis, would both be the main protagonists of the Battle Network games as well. Since it is the digital age, we quickly get into what the heck is happening. Lan, in the human world, along with his friends, have these digital devices called PETs that let them be connected or jack into the internet through various ports, giving their digital avatars, or better known as NetNavis, access to the World Wide Web, and they battle their NetNavis against each other, where through their PETs they can pop in some battle chips that give their Navis some extra power-ups to enhance the battle, finding a way right off the bat to be like, hey, we're kinda like that other thing you like, so give us a try. And I don't blame them, or anyone for that matter, for attempting to find a way for this to work within their properties, especially at this time. This also gives us that duality of real-world issues and digital ones. We meet Mega Man after Lan mopes around from not having a special or powerful NetNavi, like all of his friends and rivals seem to have. Well, that is until his father, who isn't around, sends him a chip that turns out to be his new NetNavi, Mega Man himself, ready and eager to be Lan's Navi. And we get right into the action from there as we learn about the grander world of the widening web. His oven in the kitchen catches fire, but won't stay out when he tries to extinguish it, as we find out that it's a computer or digital virus inside the appliance causing a problem, and so apparently Lan can jack into anything, sending Mega Man in to fight off these viruses, which are just these extremely adorable little guys. I love them, as in in the background, a great threat looms. A big concern of the rising in popularity internet and how accessible it was for anyone was viruses, among many other things, but man, we literally used LimeWire. We infected the heck out of our PCs just to crank that Soldier Boy. It was one of the times of all time. So having a story focusing around the internet with those who use it for fun and interconnectivity through exploration and battles, and those who seek to use it in evil ways, like the main big bad of the series being Dr. Wily, voiced by Paul Dobson, who formed World 3, or WWW. I see what they did there. Him and his underlings have bad intentions planned, of course, and our main protagonist will have to end up stopping it. Luckily, Lan and Mega Man aren't the only ones we focus on in the show. We meet plenty of others who are both good, bad, rivalish, and random to join in on the fighting back or just getting in the way. From Melu, voiced by Brittany Wilson, and her Navi role, voiced by Lenore Zan, to Chud, voiced by Bill Switzer, and his classic companion NetNavi of Proto Man, voiced by David Kay. There are plenty of characters to go over that really build this show into a really cool premise and immersive story that coming back to has been nothing but a warm returning feeling. This would also be great at giving some shine to the video games specifically. Hey, you like these characters in the show? Why wouldn't you like them in the video game? A series of video games, for that matter, that tell a grander story thanks to the sheer volume of them, offering a lot of really fun and unique gameplay. Let's take a peek into the world of the video games, as a whole new Mega Man vibe was a full assault on every medium.
You're watching an all-new Mega Man NT Warrior on Kids WB.
Mad Monkey Summer continues with Mega Man NT Warrior.
During this great reset of the Mega Man world, it heavily affected the gaming side of things, which only makes sense, of course, but here completely changing the Mega Man formula into a real-time tactical role-playing series. Now, comparatively to the original games, this was a massive change, and for many out there, this series wasn't their cup of tea. For me, however, I absolutely loved it. To me, the gameplay for the series clicked a lot more so than the original games. For this new series, it was following the formula of Pokemon, having Capcom shift focus heavily to the Game Boy Advance, with the first game coming out in March of 2001 in Japan and the American release hitting shelves on Halloween of that same year. First thing you see is, hey, why is Mega Man in the background of the box art? Who is this kid with the not Naruto headband? But you know, if you'd eventually watch the show, you can just find that out. One of the main focuses of this generation of Mega Man media was the collectibles phase of everything else on the rise, especially card game-based properties, regardless if this series focused more or less on a card game, which I will speak on later in this video. But they had another collectible asset, something that will materialize into merchandise eventually. But for the games, instead of collectible cards or traditional monster taming aspects, you would collect battle chips that have some function similar to both. Keiji Inafune really wanted to nail down a new relatable setting, giving us a real world versus the digital world setting where the human user would jack in to the net, every time yelling, "Jack in," as we enter into megaman.exe as a vessel or NetNavi into the net world. Yeah, maybe jack in wasn't as hip as it was trying to sound, and when looking back at it, yeah, plug in probably would have been a better option. It could have worked better, but you know, who am I to say? It was trying to really bring in that 2000s internet attitude that really defined us. If you weren't there, then you can never truly understand. Ooh, not me gatekeeping an aesthetic. Most iconically in the game was the 3x6 battle grid gameplay when battling as Mega Man, taking down your enemies. I always found just the visual of this so neat and pretty straightforward because of making it bold, colorful, and simple. These computer viruses you faced off against are pretty cool in design as well. You move around and try and land your attacks to reduce their life points down to 0, so then they will be defeated. Through the connected PET device that the human LAN has, you can insert battle chip upgrades that can aid you in battle, from special abilities to upgrades or restoring health or just directly affecting the viruses. When developing this game and what it could be even before the decision to head into the collectible RPG world, Capcom came up with this being some sort of horror game, and maybe that's why this ketchup hallway death gag was a thing. But wanting to literally have the kind of fun you get from a Pokemon game, game director Masahiro Yasuma saw this as a great time to really refresh the series in an effort to reach more of a new audience and a way into the expansion of the property into all the other mediums. Because of that, something cool they added to the game in development was a connectivity feature that allowed you to connect with another person listen via a link cable and battle for fun, or battle for some real stakes where you can put chips on the line, or you can just, trade them. While this new style of game ended up with some positive reviews for the most part, there was a major disconnect with some of the older fans of the franchise who either weren't into the overall new look and story of Mega Man, and or not into the gameplay style being completely different. Since then, with the original style of Mega Man making more of a comeback beyond this, we can really just look at this as a spin-off series that just took up all of Mega Man's time until his older style eventually returned. After the first game came out, the sequel would come out in that same year of 2001 in Japan, as the US would receive the sequel in June of the following year. The main difference here is that the second game has some new features and concepts that change up the base formula, which for the most part was the same. It looks the same, it essentially plays the same, just a few new things. It wouldn't be until the next game that things would really change, as now it would be time to really go after the Pokemon market, having two versions of what is basically the same game release, with a blue version featuring Mega Man on the cover and a white version also featuring Mega Man on the cover. Yeah, it's just Mega Man twice, but there are some netnavs specific to each version, but really this is nothing more than a cover vanity. The games themselves though do really get an upgrade here. Some graphical upgrades, changing of how power-ups work and can be used, as well as a good virus breeding system, and then chip labeling that mainly relates back to the whole blue or white thing. And we can all just admit that it was only to duplicate the multiple version strategy, just with less differences. It doesn't mean the games are bad. The Japanese release was in December of 2002, with the US release dropping in June of 2003. The dual version releases though wouldn't stop there, with the next games being Red Sun and Blue Moon, probably before the beer. I don't know, I don't drink beer, but with each having Mega Man on the cover again. Were there any differences more than just version exclusive navis? Well, yes, there were, just with different chips and souls, so really just pretty much small differences once again. But the games would continue to evolve and offer new gameplay mechanics, as well as a multiple playthrough story and an emotion window that determines the mood or current state of Mega Man, specifically because of all the new features that affect the battling and the strategies. Coming out in the tail end of December in 2003 for Japan, with a June 2004 release for the US. Mega Man Battle Network 5 would eventually come out with two versions in Japan, first with a December release for one version at the end of 2004, and a February release for the other one in 2005, both for the Game Boy Advance still, with the US release of Team Colonel and Team Proto Man in June of 2005. At this point, with yearly releases though, the fatigue set in, and the constant small changes and different versions gimmick was starting to get old with critics and some fans as well, which made us all for sure want to buy a third version of the game, the first one to be released on the Nintendo DS, Mega Man 5 Battle Network Double Team DS. That was a mouthful. This released a few months later in 2005, with the US getting it in November, where it would feature some small upgrades from the Game Boy versions of the game with some additional content as well. And while that's really cool, at this point with the series, where do you even take it? You'd probably want to evolve it and keep it going on the Nintendo DS from here, and use the power of that system to help grow the franchise. But on a basic level, sure, you can just keep coming up with new stories and tweaks here and there. But if we look at the landscape of where this new version of Mega Man is it starting to hit a stale point on every single front that it's at? Well, maybe not quite. One final entry into the Mega Man Battle Network series would hit in Japan by November of 2005, and in the US by June of 2006. But this time back on the Game Boy, rather than going forward onto the Nintendo DS, which I felt caught a lot of people off guard, and a lot of people to just totally miss the release of it in general. Again, releasing with two versions, Psybeast Gregor and Psybeast Falzar. And the final big difference is right there in the title of the games. These Psybeasts are being reawakened by the bad guys, and you have to stop them. It was the finale to the main line of the spin-off series, with the main problem being the lack of innovation finally biting themselves in the foot. I think I just mixed up two sayings into one, but I'm leaving it in. There you go. Aside from the story, it was just hard to see the series not only stay stagnant, but regress in some ways. So while this game series would fade away from this point, the rest of this new take on Mega Man would as well. But now, all these years later, a full re-release and upgraded versions of every Battle Network game is coming out, called Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. And I cannot wait to dive back fully into each title to at least have them on current enough consoles to make them more accessible and easier to get to than ever. It will be released in the US on April 14th, 2023. Oh, weird. That's today as this video goes up. It's funny how that happens. Anyway, let's touch back on the show for now.
Mega Meg, all this month on Kids WB.
Mega Man NT Warrior has Surf's Up Saturday now continues on Kids WB.
Digging in deeper, the anime was something I found extremely entertaining. It was the perfect amount of fun internet action and corny dialogue. While this was still a Capcom property, enhancer of sorts, the show had a lot of heart behind it, with the full-on intensity to make something that doesn't disappoint fans, but builds something unique that really gets into a friendship that transcends both the electronic and real world. Something that would be full of emotion and can be a bridge directly to the games. It was all in favor of gaining new fans for the franchise while trying not to alienate the legacy fans, not wanting to betray them or have them feeling that way. So just picture it. The anime is coming to the States. This mega stuff Saturday morning on Kids WB was coming up on May 17th, 2003, and a preview of the show was played, sandwiched between Jackie Chan Adventures and Pokemon Master Quest. So yeah, people were surely watching. To also promote the upcoming anime, they had a sweepstakes that had a bunch of prizes like Game Boy Advances and all of the currently released Mega Man Battle Network games, with over 200 prizes dispersed out. On June 23rd, 2003, the show would officially premiere on Kids WB, and it was exactly what it needed to be. A perfect Saturday morning cartoon that brought you along on these grand adventures with a group of friends and rivals mixed in with a devious and evil plot. Lan himself is a headstrong character with a bit of hopefulness and charisma thrown in for good measure, as his relationship with Mega Man evolves throughout the show to just be the classic perfect protagonists, with Mega Man specifically being the goody two-shoes fighter for justice character that is able to adapt well to changes when it comes to powers and abilities. With a big heart and bigger blaster, there's a reason why the show is called Mega Man and not Mega Lan. Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry for that one. Meilu is pretty important to the show as well. She's as sweet as she is feisty, dishing out her care for Lan, but prone to explode into a rage if necessary. She's a great friend and is built to be something more than that, possibly as the series would go on. She's overall pretty likable, and I think Roll is a really cool character, offering a fun vibe and a perfect duo in comparison to Lan and Mega Man. All of the characters we meet along the way are really cool for the most part and add a lot to the overall experience, as we do meet quite the amount of people with both small and large roles, both inside and outside of the digital world. There's Dex, and he's the definition of, hey, where's my hug energy? Especially over Meilu, and him and Lan are seen as rivals. He is voiced by Tony Sampson, with his trusty NetNavi being Gutsman, voiced by Scott McNeil. There's also Yai Amano, voiced by Jocelyn Lowen, with her NetNavi being Glide, voiced by Ted Cole. She's rich and manipulative, and what more do you expect when you see this little demon here? We support it. Just in general, the characters are all really fun to see interact with each other, and then bringing on the elements of their Navis all being so cool and unique that I just loved the time spent both in and out of the internet here. The animation in the show looks great, and the action scenes were all engaging, always finding a fun way to play with the visuals to represent the connections between the humans and the Navis. The show wasn't afraid to get a bit complex at times with its story and characters, offering a nice balance of fun and some lighter moments, but more gravitas in more serious moments. It felt nicely directed, allowing for some really solid pacing, not one time feeling like something was going on for too long. I feel something that did hurt the show was how Kids WB would play episodes out of order, making it harder to keep up with the storyline progressing, and it was just weirder that it was a show that initially was performing so well for them. But for just as quick as it came, it felt like it was starting to disappear, with this slow bleed out of episodes to eventually have the rest left dropped so randomly. And that strategy didn't bode too well for the rest of the series. Viz Media did what they could while producing the series, with the animation not being their only avenue with it, but I'll get to that in a second. It became clear that we weren't going to get a clean run of the show, not seeing everything in its full entirety, which is a shame. The show was for sure a lot bigger in Japan, having more to continue with the story and even a movie that was tied into a double feature feature with Duel Masters. While I wish that continued here and the series ran for longer than it did, I still think for what we did get was pretty special and enough of a reason to sell you on checking out the other aspects of Mega Man this era aside from just the show. It did have censorship issues, but anything at this time especially was going through that, and it never was anything that really ruined the experience. It's just weird that with the success it supposedly had, why were there so many episodes that played out of order? Why did the support of bringing the show over stop? Because lack of interest? Possibly. It was a time of too much of a good thing. Rather than focus on doing the best parts of things great, stuff like the quality of the games started to suffer in terms of improving them. It became quantity over quality. The show just kind of became this expendable thing in the mix there, at least for the US is concerned, and all of the merchandise associated with the property would follow suit over the following years and make a disappearance. Was it time to cut their losses, or was it time to try something new with Mega Man again? Because it also wasn't the last anime the US would see for Mega Man, as we would then get Mega Man Star Force, which would take place 200 years in the future from the NT Warrior series. And while maintaining a somewhat similar look to the previous show, it definitely was a lot different. But as far as the show, those are my thoughts on it, and I feel that time going by has just made the show a whole lot more fun thanks to my nostalgia for this era, having extremely fond memories of it all. But there are still some other moving parts to this series before it would all come to an end and this era of Mega Man would be over. There's a few more things to take a look at.
Mega Man's Mega Villain Week, beginning Monday afternoon at 3:30. Mega Man NT Warrior, coming in May.
Something I haven't touched on yet would be the manga series. I myself still have my original several volumes here, but never finished collecting the series as the series would officially end at volume 13. But I absolutely love them for what I had. No clue why I never got the rest of the series, but I'm just so weirdly nostalgic for the artwork in this manga. I probably will go on and finish collecting the rest of the series here at some point, but beyond that, the other super big part of the market for this new Mega Man series was the merchandise, specifically all of the toys that came out. First of all, we all somehow had this, right? I can't recall ever asking for this for my birthday or a holiday, or even when or how I actually received it, but I feel like everyone I knew had one of these, and I still have mine. This Mega Man Mega Buster Cannon that has 2 modes with blaster and sword features. It's honestly pretty sick. There were an abundance of action figures, from these really cool smaller sized ones but having such cool poses, then some mid-sized ones and even deluxe ones, and everyone had this Mega Man action figure, I swear. But also as memorable was this, the advanced PET, which could be used with all of those battle chips that have NetNavies in them where you can battle them against computer viruses and more. Mattel would bring products like this as much as they could outside of Japan, but in general, the majority of merchandise stayed in Japan. One other aspect that was brought to the United States thanks to Decipher was the Mega Man NT Warrior trading card game, which surprisingly, I never really looked into as a kid, especially with how much I liked every other aspect of this new Mega Man, but hey, what can you do? Now, while not being exactly the same as the Japanese version of this card game, the cards look like your standard anime card game. The booster boxes look cool, but it never really was a massive hit. It had a total of 3 sets and it ended in 2005. Mega Man NT Warrior as a show was a really fun way to enjoy the property. Kids WB have stated just how well the show was performing for them, that it beat out all of these other competitors within its demographic, which again kind of confuses me. But thanks to the other fronts of this new Mega Man seemingly coming to an end, from the games to the manga, the show suffered a similar fate, despite how much viewership it apparently had. Honestly, Capcom really came swinging hard with a bunch of avenues ready to go. It may already seem like a lot just from the anime, to the merch, to the manga, to the games, but even in saying that, we only covered on a base level the main 6 games in the Battle Network series, not even touching on the other games that came out in this era as well that tied into everything. First, they also wanted to take things from the handheld to the console, with a Japanese release in March of 2003 and a US release in June of 2003, Mega Man Network Transmission dropped on the GameCube, trying to be this bridge between the original style of Mega Man games and this new style of them, having a lot of the core original elements of action and platforming, yet still having a role-playing and strategy aspect that makes the new new games very fun. While I really loved the look and feel of this game personally, it didn't fare as well on the review side of things from the critics. It definitely was a bit clunky in terms of some of the game mechanics, and some of the enemies would be taking some cheap shots at you, but it was pretty ambitious and a smart move to try and develop something that sits in between both of the gameplay styles. Now heading back to the Game Boy Advance, there was a spin-off of the spin-off called Mega Man Battle Chip Challenge. It dropped in Japan on both the Game Boy Advance and WonderSwan Color in August of 2003, and hit the US in March of 2004. And what would set it apart from the Battle Network games is that if the Battle Network games could be seen like the mainline Pokemon games, then Battle Chip Challenge can be seen as the Pokemon trading card game. This turns the battle chip aspect directly into a card game deck building concept as you enter into a tournament. There was a lot of Mega Man in a little amount of time, and this isn't even considering the stuff that I didn't see at the time, like the Japanese only video games for the series under the Rockman.exe branding, or whatever aspects of the anime never made their way over here. If anything, this was all a bold decision from Capcom, essentially reinventing the character and molding them into something familiar enough, but in almost every aspect completely new. I feel this iteration really helped me get into Mega Man, and it's the version I connect with the most. I had a lot of fun playing the games growing up, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with them now thanks to this re-release coming out. I very much enjoyed the manga growing up, and I plan on finishing it, purchasing the rest of the volumes I don't have, and of course, the anime I think is fantastic. It's just extremely charming, and it has all the makings of what the franchises similar to it have, and it captured my interest greatly. While after this re-release, I highly expect to not hear anything coming from the Battle Network era for quite some time, or ever again for that matter, it was still a lot of fun to look back on it all and relive every bit of it as an adult. And I still have this blaster. What do I even do with this thing? Let me know your thoughts on everything from this era of Mega Man in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Later.
Seconds, please.